Lucy stepped off the transport shuttle and took her first breath of recycled station air. Orbital Station, Harmony floated in the darkness between two moons, a place built for species who had never trusted each other to learn how to work together. Lucy had spent 3 months preparing for this assignment. She had studied the language until her throat ached from the growling sounds. She had memorized their customs, their ranks, and their history. She thought she was ready for anything. She was wrong. The officer who met her at the docking bay stood nearly 8 feet tall. His body was covered in dark gray fur, and his face looked like something between a wolf and a bear. His eyes were yellow, and they watched Lucy the way a predator watches prey. He wore armor across his chest and shoulders, and scars marked his arms in patterns that Lucy knew meant rank and battle experience. "I am pack leader," he said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You are the human trainer." Lucy nodded. She kept her posture straight and her hands visible at her sides. The respected confidence, and they could smell fear. "I am. I was told I would be working with your soldiers on combat integration." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "There has been a change. Follow me." They walked through metal corridors filled with beings from a dozen different species. Lucy saw the tall, thin with their silver skin. She passed a group of insect-like creatures who clicked their jaws as she walked by. Everyone moved out of sway. Lucy understood why. They were known throughout the galaxy as the most dangerous warriors alive. Their strength, their speed, and their loyalty to their packs made them feared on every battlefield. Stopped outside a large door marked with warning symbols. "Your assignment is inside." Lucy looked at the door, then back at the massive alien. "What exactly is my assignment?" "Cubs," said. "5 of them, orphans from the border conflicts. They have been here for 6 months, and no trainer has lasted more than a week with them." Lucy felt her stomach tighten. She had trained soldiers. She had worked with adults who chose to be there. Children were different. Why me? Surely a trainer would be better suited. His ears flattened against his skull. "Our trainers have tried. The cubs are defective. They show too much emotion, too much individual thought. They do not respond to proper discipline. The council believes a human approach might reach them where ours has failed." His tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. "And if I cannot reach them?" "Then they will be sent to a military youth facility on our where they will be taught to obey, or they will be broken trying." Stepped closer, and Lucy had to fight the urge to step back. "I do not believe you can help them. Humans are soft. You lack claws, you lack fangs, and you lack the strength to survive if one of those cubs decides to attack. They have already injured 3 trainers." Lucy thought about the life waiting for those children. She thought about military facilities and being broken. She looked up at and held his yellow gaze. "Open the door." Something flickered in his eyes. It might have been surprise. He pressed his paw against the security panel and the door slid open. The training hall beyond was enormous. The walls were bare metal and the floor was covered in scratches from claws. There were no toys, no soft surfaces, nothing that looked like it belonged in a space meant for children. In the far corner, 5 small shapes huddled together in a tight group. Lucy could see their fur, ranging from dark brown to pale gray. She could see their small pointed ears pressed flat with fear or aggression. She could not tell which. Lucy took a step into the room. Behind her, she heard say something to the other officers gathered in the observation area above. She did not listen. Her attention was fixed on the cubs. They were watching her too. 10 yellow eyes stared at her from across the room. Lucy could see them sniffing the air, taking in her scent. She knew she must smell strange to them. Humans did not have fur. They did not smell like pack or family or anything the cubs would recognize. Lucy took another step forward, then another. She moved slowly, keeping her body relaxed and her movements smooth. She had worked with frightened animals before back on Earth. She had helped rehabilitate dogs that had been abused and abandoned. The principles were the same. Move slowly. Stay calm. Let them come to you. She was about 10 meters from the cubs when something unexpected happened. The largest cub, a female with dark brown fur and fierce eyes, lifted her head. She made a sound, somewhere between a whine and a growl. The other cubs looked at her, then back at Lucy. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the largest cub stood up. She took a step toward Lucy, then another. And then, as if a signal had been given, all 5 cubs broke from their huddle and ran straight at the human. Lucy heard shouts from the observation deck above. She heard bark and order. She saw movement in her peripheral vision as officers reached for weapons. But she did not move. She stood perfectly still as 5 young aliens sprinted toward her with claws and teeth that could tear through metal. The cubs reached her and did not attack. They pressed against her legs. They pushed their small bodies against her, sniffing and whining and making sounds she had never heard before. One of them, the smallest, with pale gray fur and trembling limbs, looked up at her with eyes full of something that looked terribly like hope. Lucy slowly knelt down, bringing herself to their level. Small paws grabbed at her uniform. Wet noses pressed against her hands. She felt their warmth through her clothes, felt the rapid beating of their hearts. Above her, the observation deck had gone completely silent. Stood at the railing, his expression unreadable. He had been prepared for many outcomes when the human entered that room. He had been prepared for screaming, for blood, for another failed attempt to reach the unreachable cubs. He had not been prepared for this. The cubs who had refused to let any touch them for 6 months were climbing over each other to get closer to a small, clawless, fragile human woman. Lucy looked up at the observation deck and met eyes. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply wrapped her arms around as many small, furry bodies as she could hold and let them press against her. "Well," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else, "I guess we are starting now." In her arms, the smallest cub buried his face against her shoulder and made a sound she would later learn was the word for safe. The observation deck remained crowded for hours after Lucy entered the training hall. Officers from 6 different species pressed against the viewing windows, watching the strange scene below. A human woman sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor while 5 cubs arranged themselves around her like she was the center of their universe. Lucy did not try to do anything impressive that first day. She simply sat with them. She let them smell her hair and examine her fingers. She let them press their ears against her chest to listen to her heartbeat. When one of them accidentally scratched her arm with a small claw, she did not flinch or pull away. She just kept breathing slowly and speaking in a soft voice. "It is okay," she told them. "I am not going anywhere." The largest cub, the female with dark brown fur, positioned herself between Lucy and the door. Her name was, according to the files Lucy had read. She was 6 years old in human terms, and she had taken responsibility for the other cubs since the day they arrived at the station. Every trainer who had tried to work with them reported the same thing: trusted no one and allowed no one near her siblings. But now sat with her back against Lucy's side, watching the door with sharp eyes, as if she had decided that this human belonged to her pack and she would protect her. The male cub with a torn and left ear was named Torn. He was 5 years old and the most aggressive of the group. The files said he had bitten through a trainer's protective glove and broken 2 of their fingers. Now he lay on his back near Lucy's knee, letting her rub his belly while he made a rumbling sound that might have been purring. The twin cubs, Myra and Saul, were 4 years old. They had not been separated since birth, and they showed extreme anxiety whenever anyone tried to work with them individually. They sat pressed together on Lucy's other side, their small paws intertwined, watching everything with wide, nervous eyes. And then there was the smallest one. His name was Ash. He was 4 years old, small for his age, and he had not spoken a single word since arriving at the station. The other trainers had labeled him mentally deficient. They had recommended he be sent to a special facility where cubs like him were kept away from normal society. Ash had climbed into Lucy's lap within the first 10 minutes and had not moved since. His pale gray fur was softer than the others, and she could feel his bones too clearly beneath his skin. He was not eating enough. He was not thriving. Lucy held him gently and felt him tremble against her. "I see you," she whispered to him. "I see you, little one." Ash pressed closer and closed his eyes. When the station lights dimmed to signal evening hours finally entered the training hall, the cubs immediately tensed, rose to her feet with a growl, positioning herself in front of Lucy. Torn rolled upright, his small claws extending. "Easy," Lucy said softly. "He is not going to hurt us." Stopped several meters away. He looked at the cubs, then at Lucy, then back at the cubs. His expression was difficult to read, but Lucy thought she saw something like confusion in his yellow eyes. "They should be returned to their holding area for the night," said. "Do they have blankets there, soft bedding? They have temperature-controlled environments and adequate nutrition delivery systems." "That is not what I asked." His ears flicked. "Cubs do not require soft bedding. They are raised to endure hardship from birth. It builds strength." Lucy looked down at Ash, who had started trembling again at the sound of his voice. She looked at Myra and Saul, clutching each other so tightly their small claws were leaving marks. She looked at, standing guard with her baby teeth bared at a warrior 10 times her size. "These cubs have endured enough hardship," Lucy said. "They watched their parents die. They were brought to a station full of strangers who could not touch them without causing fear. They have spent 6 months in isolation because no one knew what else to do with them." She stood slowly, keeping Ash cradled against her chest. "They do not need more hardship. They need safety. They need warmth. They need someone to show them that the universe is not just pain and loss." Was silent for a long moment. "You speak as if you understand them." "I understand what it means to be small and afraid and alone. Every human does. We are born helpless. We spend years dependent on others for survival. It teaches us something that perhaps your species has forgotten." "And what is that?" "That needing others is not weakness. That accepting comfort is not failure. That a pack built on love is stronger than a pack built on fear." His jaw tightened. For a moment, Lucy thought he might argue. Instead, he turned and walked toward the door. "I will have bedding materials sent to the holding area, and I will inform the council that you will be continuing the program." He paused at the threshold and looked back. "My cubs died in the same attack that orphaned these 5. Border skirmish, they called it, as if the word matters when you are burying your children." His voice was rough. "I do not know if your methods will work, human, but I know that ours have failed. Perhaps that is enough reason to try something different." He left before Lucy could respond. That night, Lucy helped the cubs settle into their holding area. She arranged the new blankets into a nest shape, the way she had read that wild mothers did before their species became militarized. The cubs curled together in the center, and for the first time since arriving at the station, they slept without whimpering. Lucy sat beside the nest, her back against the wall, and watched them breathe. Had positioned herself at the edge of the group, facing the door, still guarding even in sleep. Torn twitched occasionally, chasing something in his dreams. Myra and Saul were tangled together so completely that Lucy could not tell where one ended and the other began. And Ash slept with one small paw stretched out toward Lucy, his fingers just touching the edge of her sleeve. She stayed awake for hours, watching them. She thought about what it said. She thought about the military facility waiting for these cubs if she failed. She thought about all the trainers who had come before her, with their discipline and their proper methods and their complete inability to reach 5 broken children. Lucy made a decision in that quiet darkness. She would not teach these cubs to be soldiers. She would not prepare them for war or train them to suppress their emotions. She would do something far more radical. She would teach them to be children. She would teach them to play and laugh and trust. She would show them that being different was not the same as being defective. She would prove to everyone watching that strength did not have to mean hardness, and that the softest hearts could be the bravest of all. In his sleep, Ash whimpered. Lucy reached out and placed her hand over his small paw. "I am here," she said. "I am not going anywhere." The whimpering stopped. Ash's breathing steadied. And somewhere in the darkness, 5 small hearts beat a little easier because a human had decided they were worth saving. 3 weeks passed, and the training hall became something new. Lucy had requested supplies from the station quartermaster. She asked for soft materials, colored fabrics, balls of different sizes, and anything that could be used for building or creating. The quartermaster, a thin with silver skin and too many questions, had looked at her list with obvious confusion. "These are not standard training materials," he said. "I am not running a standard training program," Lucy replied. The supplies arrived the next day. Lucy suspected had something to do with the speed, though he never admitted it. She transformed the cold metal space into something warmer. She hung fabric from the ceiling to create smaller, cozier areas. She built obstacle courses that required teamwork to complete. She made a quiet corner filled with soft bedding where the cubs could retreat when they felt overwhelmed. The other species on the station watched through the observation windows with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Lucy ignored them all. She had work to do. Each day followed a gentle routine. Morning began with what Lucy called circle time, where she and the cubs sat together and she taught them simple human songs. The cubs could not sing the way humans did, but they made their own sounds along with the music, and their small faces showed something that looked like joy. After circle time came play. Lucy introduced games that required the cubs to work together rather than compete against each other. She created puzzles that could only be solved when all 5 of them contributed. She set up challenges where the goal was not to win, but to help everyone finish. The first time Torn helped Saul complete a climbing obstacle instead of racing past him, Lucy felt tears sting her eyes. She wiped them away before anyone could see. The changes came slowly at first, then faster. Torn stopped lashing out with his claws when he felt frustrated. Instead, he would come to Lucy and make a specific sound she had taught him, a sound that meant he needed help calming down. She would sit with him and breathe slowly until his small body relaxed. Myra and Saul began to spend time apart from each other. It started with just a few minutes each day, then longer. They discovered that being separate did not mean being abandoned. They could always find each other again. The anxiety that had gripped them began to loosen its hold. Remained protective, but her protectiveness shifted. She no longer saw every interaction as a threat. She began to help Lucy with the younger cubs, herding them gently during activities, showing them how to do things she had already learned. She was becoming a leader in a different way, not through fear but through care. And Ash began to speak. It happened during the 4th week. Lucy was reading to the cubs from a tablet, showing them pictures of Earth animals and making up silly stories about them. The other cubs were making sounds of amusement at a picture of a fluffy cat. "Cat," Ash said quietly. Everyone went still. Lucy looked at the small gray cub, who was pointing at the screen with one trembling finger. "That is right," Lucy said, keeping her voice calm even though her heart was racing. "That is a cat. They are small animals from my planet. They are soft and they like to sleep in warm places." "Soft," Ash repeated. He looked up at Lucy. "Like you." Lucy gathered him into her arms and held him close. Over his small shoulder, she saw watching with an expression she had never seen on the cub's face before. It took her a moment to recognize it. It was hope. The other species on the station began to take notice of the changes. A group of researchers requested permission to observe Lucy's methods. 2 child development specialists asked for copies of her lesson plans. Even some officers started appearing at the observation windows, watching with expressions that suggested they were questioning everything they had been taught about raising their young. Not everyone approved. Lucy heard the whispers in the corridors. She saw the looks from certain officers who viewed her methods as an insult to their culture. She knew that reports were being sent back to the reports that described her training program as corruption rather than education. She also knew that someone powerful was paying attention. Warned her one evening after the cubs had gone to sleep. He came to the training hall and stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking the light from the corridor. "High Matron has requested an inspection," he said. "She arrives in 1 week." Lucy had heard the name before, was the leader of the traditionalist faction among the. She believed that their species had become great through strict discipline and emotional control. She viewed any deviation from traditional methods as dangerous weakness. "What does she want?" Lucy asked. "To shut you down, to take the cubs and send them where they were always meant to go. The military facility will break them, reshape them into proper citizens, or it will destroy them trying." His voice was heavy. "Believes some losses are acceptable in pursuit of strength." Lucy felt cold. "And what do you believe?" Was quiet for a long moment. "I believe my cubs deserved better than what our traditions gave them. I believe these 5 deserve better too." He met her eyes. "But belief does not matter when arrives. She has authority from the council to evaluate the program and make recommendations. If she decides you have failed, no one will be able to stop her." "Then I have 1 week to prove I have not failed." "You have 1 week to prove that everything our species believes about strength and weakness is wrong." Turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you can do it, human, for their sake and perhaps for ours." After he left, Lucy sat in the quiet training hall and thought about what lay ahead. She thought about 5 small lives depending on her. She thought about a culture that had forgotten how to nurture its young. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she stood up and began planning. She would not change her methods to impress. She would not suddenly impose discipline and order to make the program look more traditional. She would keep doing exactly what she had been doing because it was working. The cubs were healing. They were growing. They were becoming something that they had never seen before. They were becoming whole. When Lucy finally went to check on the cubs that night, she found them arranged in their usual sleeping pile. But something was different. They had made space in the center of the nest, a Lucy-sized space, surrounded by warm, furry bodies. Lifted her head and made a soft sound that Lucy had learned meant welcome. Lucy climbed into the nest and let the cubs arrange themselves around her. Ash pressed against her chest. Torn curled against her back. Myra and Saul tangled around her legs, lay across the entrance like a guardian. For the first time since arriving at Station Harmony, Lucy did not feel like an outsider. She felt like pack. High Matron arrived on Station Harmony with a fleet of aides and a reputation that made even senior officers nervous. She was tall for a female, with pure white fur that marked her as descended from the ancient mountain packs. Her eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they held no warmth at all. Lucy watched her arrival from the observation deck above the docking bay. The cubs pressed close to her legs, sensing her tension even though she tried to hide it. "Who is that?" asked. Her ears were flat and her small body was rigid with alertness. "Someone important," Lucy said. "Someone who wants to meet all of you." "Is she dangerous?" Lucy thought about lying. She thought about protecting the cubs from the truth. But she had promised herself she would never treat them as less capable than they were. "She might be," Lucy said honestly, "but I will not let her hurt you, none of you." Torn pressed his head against Lucy's hand. "We will not let her hurt you either." The inspection began the next morning. Swept into the training hall with her aides behind her, their tablets ready to record every detail. She looked at the hanging fabrics, the soft play areas, the colorful materials scattered across the floor. Her expression showed nothing, but Lucy saw her nostrils flare with what might have been discussed. "This is a training facility," said. Her voice was cold and precise. "It looks like a nursery for weaklings." "It is a place where children can learn and grow," Lucy replied. She kept her voice steady. The methods may look different, but the results speak for themselves. Do they? Turned those pale eyes toward the cubs, who had gathered in a tight group near Lucy. These are the defectives who could not adapt to proper training. Now they cling to an alien like frightened prey animals. I see no improvement. Lucy felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. Getting angry would not help the cubs. With respect, High Matron, you have been here for 5 minutes. Perhaps you should observe before making judgments. His ears twitched. No one spoke to her that way. But before she could respond, one of her aides stepped forward with a tablet. High Matron, I have prepared a standard evaluation protocol. If the cubs can pass these tests, it would demonstrate measurable progress according to traditional standards. Considered this. A thin smile crossed her face. Very well, we will test them properly. Then we will see what this human has truly accomplished. The tests were nothing like anything Lucy had prepared the cubs for. The first test involved isolation chambers, small metal boxes where each cub would be placed alone for 1 hour. The chambers would play loud noises at random intervals, simulating combat conditions. A proper cub would remain calm and silent throughout. The second test involved simulated threats, holographic predators that would charge at the cubs while they were restrained. They were expected to show controlled aggression, fighting against their restraints in a measured way that demonstrated warrior spirit without panic. The third test was the worst. Each cub would be placed in a room with a piece of food and another cub. Only one could eat. Proper cubs fought for resources. Sharing was considered weakness. These tests are designed to traumatize them, Lucy said, her voice tight with controlled fury. They are not assessments, they are punishments. They are the same tests every cub faces at this age, replied. If your methods have truly helped them, they should be able to pass, unless you are admitting that you have only taught them to be soft. Lucy looked at the cubs. Myra and Saul were holding each other, trembling. Torn's claws had extended, and he was growling low in his throat. Ash had gone completely still, his eyes vacant in a way that Lucy recognized as the beginning of a shutdown. Only met Lucy's eyes. In her gaze, Lucy saw something unexpected, not fear, determination. We can do it, said quietly. For you, for Pack. The tests began. Lucy was not allowed to be present, but she watched through the observation windows, her hands pressed flat against the glass, her heart breaking with every passing minute. Myra went first into the isolation chamber. The small cub curled into a ball when the noises started, shaking violently. But she did not cry out. She whispered something to herself over and over, and Lucy realized it was a song she had taught them. Saul passed his isolation test the same way. So did Torn, though he scratched deep grooves into the metal floor with his claws. Ash did not react to anything. He sat in the center of the chamber with empty eyes, not moving, not responding, completely disconnected from reality. The aides recorded this as a pass, nodding that he showed no signs of panic. Lucy knew the truth. He had retreated so far inside himself that the outside world could not reach him. The simulated threat tests went worse. Torn attacked the holographic predator with such ferocity that he had to be sedated when the test ended. Myra and Saul both failed, screaming and trying to escape rather than showing controlled aggression. But the final test was where everything fell apart. They put an Ash in the room together with one piece of food, was supposed to fight for it. She was supposed to show dominance over the smaller, weaker cub. Instead, picked up the food, walked to Ash and placed it in front of him. When he did not respond, she pushed it gently toward his paws and then sat beside him, waiting. His voice came through the speakers. The test requires one of you to eat. If neither of you eats, you both fail. Looked up at the observation window. Her small face was set with defiance. Then we both fail. Ordered the test ended. She ordered the cubs returned to their holding area and Lucy confined to her quarters. The program was officially deemed a failure. The cubs would be transported to the military facility within 48 hours. Lucy sat in her small room, staring at the wall, feeling more helpless than she had ever felt in her life. She had tried so hard. The cubs had come so far, and none of it mattered because she could not protect them from a system designed to break them. A scratching sound came from her door. Lucy stood slowly and walked toward it. The sound came again, followed by a soft whine that she recognized immediately. She opened the door and found all 5 cubs huddled in the corridor outside. They must have escaped from their holding area. They must have found their way through the station to her quarters. 5 small faces looked up at her with eyes full of trust and fear and desperate hope. Ash stepped forward. He was still trembling from the tests, still partially disconnected from himself. But he looked at Lucy and his mouth moved, and words came out that she had never heard him speak before. "You are Pack," he said. His voice was rough and unused but clear. "We stay." Lucy dropped to her knees and gathered them all into her arms. She held them while they pressed against her, while they whimpered and shook, while they found safety in the only place they had ever known it. "I am not going to let them take you," she whispered. "I do not know how yet, but I promise I will find a way." In the darkness of the corridor, 5 small hearts beat against hers, and Lucy knew that she would keep that promise or die trying. The tribunal convened in the station's central council chamber, a vast circular room designed to humble anyone who stood at its center. Representatives from 12 species sat in elevated seats around the perimeter, looking down at Lucy like judges preparing to deliver a sentence. Stood at the prosecution podium, her white fur gleaming under the artificial lights. Her pale eyes were fixed on Lucy with cold satisfaction. "The evidence is clear," said. "The humans' methods have produced cubs who cannot pass basic evaluation tests, cubs who refuse to compete for resources, cubs who prioritize emotional bonds over survival instincts. She has not trained them, she has corrupted them." Lucy stood alone at the center of the chamber. She had been allowed no advocates, no support, no defense. This was not a fair trial. It was a formality before an execution. "The cubs will be transferred to Military Youth Facility 7 on our," continued. "There, proper training will undo the damage this human has caused. If the cubs cannot be corrected, they will be classified as unsuitable for society and dealt with accordingly." Lucy knew what "dealt with accordingly" meant. She had read the reports about cubs who could not conform. They did not survive the facilities. "Does the human wish to speak before judgment is rendered?" The question came from the council chair, a massive 4-armed with ancient eyes. Lucy lifted her chin. "I do." "Then speak, though I doubt any words can change what has already been decided." Lucy took a breath and looked around the chamber at all the faces watching her. She saw curiosity, hostility, indifference. She saw standing near the back, his yellow eyes unreadable. "You look at those cubs and see failure," Lucy began. "You see children who cannot follow rules, who cannot suppress their emotions, who cannot become the soldiers you want them to be. But I have spent weeks with them. I have watched them grow and change and heal. And what I see is something completely different." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I see who lost her parents but refused to let her siblings suffer alone. She took responsibility for 4 other cubs when she was barely more than a baby herself. She has the heart of a leader, not because she dominates others but because she protects them. That is real strength." "I see Torn, who was so full of anger that he hurt everyone who came near him. But underneath that anger was fear, and underneath that fear was a desperate need to be safe. When I taught him that he could express his feelings without violence, he became gentle. He became kind. That is not weakness. That is growth." "I see Myra and Saul, who were so afraid of being separated that they could not function alone. Now they can be apart and come back together. They have learned that love does not disappear when you cannot see it. That is healing." Lucy's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "And I see Ash, who was called defective because he did not speak, because he retreated from a world that had only ever hurt him. Last night, he spoke his first full sentence. He said I was pack. He said we stay. A cub who was written off as broken found his voice because someone finally took the time to listen." The chamber was silent. Evan's expression had shifted, though Lucy could not tell what emotion lay beneath it. "You test your cubs by isolating them, frightening them, forcing them to fight each other for food. You call this strength training. I call it cruelty. You break them down and expect them to rebuild themselves into something hard and cold. Some of them do, but some of them cannot, and those are the ones you throw away." Lucy turned to face directly. "Did not fail your final test. She passed a different test, a harder one. When given the choice between taking for herself and giving to someone weaker, she chose to give. When told that she would fail if she did not fight, she chose to fail. She chose compassion over competition. She chose family over survival. That is not weakness. That is the kind of strength that builds something better than empires. It builds love." Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. An officer entered and whispered something to the council chair, who looked surprised and then nodded. "The Cubs have requested to address the tribunal," the chair announced. "This is irregular, but given the circumstances, I will allow it." Lucy's heart stopped as she saw them enter. 5 small figures walked into the vast chamber, surrounded by towering aliens and harsh lights. They should have looked tiny and afraid. Instead, they walked in formation, with at the lead and the others arranged around Ash in the center like a protective shield. They walked straight to Lucy and stopped beside her. Then they turned to face the tribunal. Spoke first, her young voice clear and strong. "The human taught us things no ever did. She taught us that being scared does not mean being weak. She taught us that helping each other makes us stronger, not weaker. She taught us that we are worth more than what we can fight." Torn stepped forward. "I used to hurt people because I did not know how else to make the fear go away. Now I know. Now I can ask for help. Now I can be helped. That is not corruption. That is learning." Myra and Saul spoke together, their voices overlapping in a way that somehow made perfect sense. "We were so afraid of being alone. The humans showed us that we carry each other in our hearts, even when we are apart. We are not afraid anymore." Then Ash stepped forward. The smallest cub, the one everyone had written off, the one who had not spoken for months until a human woman showed him he was worth hearing. He walked directly toward. The High Matron looked down at him, her expression unreadable. Ash reached into his fur and pulled out a small object. It was a bracelet, woven from scraps of colored fabric that Lucy had given them for art projects. "We made this together," Ash said. His voice was soft but steady. "All of us, for you, because the human taught us that gifts given freely are the strongest bonds." He held the bracelet up toward. The chamber held its breath. For a long moment, did not move. Her pale eyes studied the tiny cub offering her a gift made from scraps, a gesture so foreign to culture that it might as well have been from another universe. Then slowly, she reached down and took the bracelet. When the vote came, it was unanimous. The program would continue. Lucy was offered a permanent position as the station's first human youth specialist. More importantly, formally requested that Lucy's methods be studied for potential adoption into standard child development practices. Did not speak again during the tribunal, but as she left the chamber, Lucy noticed that she was still holding the small woven bracelet. 2 months later, Lucy sat in the renovated training hall. It was filled with natural light now, with soft spaces and play areas and everything children needed to grow. The original 5 cubs were there, but they were not alone anymore. A new group of young had arrived that morning, transfers from other facilities where traditional methods had failed. They huddled in the corner the way Lucy's cubs had done once, frightened and defensive, and convinced that no one would ever understand them. walked toward them with confidence and kindness in every step. She stopped a few meters away and sat down, making herself small and non-threatening. "Do not be afraid," she told the newcomers. "The human is strange and she is loud and she does not have any claws or fur, but she is good pack," smiled, showing her small teeth in a way that was warm rather than threatening. "She will teach you how to be brave. She will teach you how to be loved, and she will never ever give up on you." The newcomers looked then at the other cubs playing happily behind her, then at the human woman sitting in the middle of it all with Ash curled in her lap and Torn leaning against her shoulder. One of the new cubs, a tiny female with dark stripes in her fur, took a hesitant step forward. "Really?" she asked. "She will not give up?" Looked back at Lucy, and Lucy smiled at her, and something passed between them that needed no words at all. "Really," said, "humans are like that. They are the most stubborn creatures in the galaxy, and they love so hard that it changes everything." She held out her paw to the newcomer. "Come on," she said. "Let me introduce you to your new pack." And across the galaxy, on a station floating between two moons, something that had been broken for generations began, slowly, to heal.